Hi and welcome to the show today. My name's Charlie Burton and it's a slightly different interview we've got this time. Normally I interview traders on their own trading journeys, but today we have a therapist in by the name of Keith Tunstall. Keith, you're a BWRT advanced practitioner.
That's right, and psychotherapist.
Perfect. I knew that you would get it right and I wouldn't. Welcome to the show anyway.
Thank you for having me.
As I always do with any of our traders when we interview them, I just ask them a little bit about their past before we move on to the mindset and the trade and developing a trader mind and everything else we're going to do today. So, what got you into therapy? What inspired you to become a therapist?
Well, it was a real fascination with hypnosis. The more I learned and read about it, the more I wanted to know and train in it. And what I actually did was I actually enrolled in a course at the Essex Institute of Clinical Hypnosis, and that was back in 2000, and I became a clinical hypnotherapist. And that's really how the whole journey into the therapy world for me actually started.
And so it started that way, but then I'm assuming as the years went by and your qualifications grew, because I know you've done a number of different have held a number of different qualifications. From what you thought you were going to be doing as, I guess, a hypnotherapist when you first started, assuming that's what you were doing, to what you do now, what's the transition been like? You know, you've started out as a hypnotherapist, but you've moved.
Yes, so over the years, I've studied a different number of therapy modalities, but the real change came when BWRT, that's brain working recursive therapy, came about, created by a very clever man called Terence Watts. And when I learned that 5 years ago, I've used that almost exclusively for the last 5 years. And it really has changed everything that I thought I knew about therapy. And has changed the way that I work with clients, and the results that we now get are much, the success rates are so much higher. People aren't spending so long in therapy now because of the way that this new process works.
Can you explain a little bit then, without going into too much detail, but at a high level, what's the difference then? Because people, I mean, I remember having hypnotherapy back in the, whenever it was, late 90s to help me with my karate at competition level.
Right.
And hypnotherapy was seen to be really quite cutting edge and a bit different to traditional psychotherapy, yeah. So moving on from what you've done, like with hypnotherapy, to BWRT, what is the difference to make it easy for me to understand?
That's a great question, and the answer to that is therapies like hypnotherapy, psychotherapy, CBT, those sorts of therapies, they all work with the mind.
Right.
BWRT works in a completely different way because we're working with the brain and the brain processes.
Oh wow! So the mind versus the brain.
Yes.
Okay.
So if I said to you, Charlie, can you draw a picture of your mind? Would you really know what to draw?
No.
But if I asked you to draw a picture of your brain, you'd have a good idea about what that looks like. And so what we're dealing with with BWRT is we're dealing with a tangible asset. We know the brain exists. If we took the brain apart and said, well, where's your mind? We wouldn't actually be able to put our finger on it and say, well, it's there. So we're working with the brain processes rather than the mind.
Okay, brilliant. So, I mean, in this day and age where we're at right now, it's really quite a fascinating time with mental health being an issue. You know, it's in the national press almost on a daily basis now. So as a therapist, it must be a key point in time for someone like yourself whereby people are much more aware that they might have to see a therapist for certain aspects of whatever might be going on in their lives.
Yes, indeed. And it really is at the fore. Every time you turn your TV on or you read a newspaper, mental health is at the forefront. And I think today, actually it was yesterday, there was an article in NS Healthcare about BWRT and its use in South Africa. And the clinical psychologist over there, a really eminent psychologist, Rafiq Lockhart, uses BWRT over there, as do many psychologists now, to deal with things like PTSD, rape, and all those types of trauma that go on a daily basis. And he says that he's now able to get people back to work, policemen, people in the army, a whole range of different people, that whereas therapies such as hypnotherapy would take a long time to get someone back to work. But with BWRT, it's such a quick process so that people are able to get back to work and get over that situation so much quicker than they had been previously.
Okay, you've really now nailed it for me, because now I'm really understanding, like you're saying, about the differences between BWRT and some practical elements to that. And I'm sure you deal with people with all sorts of ailments and fat loss, weight loss, and smoking. Do you do all that sort of stuff as well, or or is that for the?
That is my main drive is anxiety based.
Okay.
So things like anxiety, social anxiety, health anxiety, phobias, PTSD, OCD. There's a wide range of different anxiety-based issues that people suffer with on a daily basis. And that's the main focus. I will do quit smoking, I will do weight loss, but the main focus is to treat people who are struggling with anxiety.
Now, before any of you guys say, Charlie, can he treat you for your OCD? I know where you're coming from on this. No. Okay, so let's move this across to trading now then. Okay. So why do you think that within trading, mindset is such an important part of what I do and people who are trading all around the world do? Why is mindset such an important part?
So with trading, I speak to a lot of traders, I help a lot of traders, and one of the things that really comes across is that they say to me, nothing like trading pushes the boundaries, the emotional boundaries. And, it's not like having a normal job where you don't go to work every day as perhaps, a manager, and you don't put your hand in your pocket and put your money on the table, and then at the end of the day you see whether that's increased or it's decreased. That's exactly what you do when you trade. You put your own money on the table each day. And there's a big emotional roller coaster with trading. 1 minute, if the trade is going in the right direction, the greed kicks in. Oh, I might let that run a bit longer. Then it starts to slow down or retrace. And then, fear kicks in. So you've got this constant battle. And if you're constantly monitoring the trades, it can be very stressful.
Yeah.
So mindset, to get that mindset right so that you can actually carry on and trade in a relaxed manner is really the key. Because if you've got the fear kicking in, then what happens is the fight or flight response gets turned on. Now, when that happens, all logic and reason for the brain is suspended. It goes out the window because the brain is really focusing on that perceived threat. And it sees the fear, it's a perceived threat. So it suspends all logic and reason. So that's why people ignore the rules. The rules then go out the window.
Can you just perceived threat? Now, we know that the only threat is that we might lose money on a trade. And for most of us, we have stop losses in place, so there's only a limited amount of funds that would lose on that very trade. But what's going on actually in the brain then? What is the brain itself or the mind, the brain? What is the brain thinking, or what process is that going through? Because you've talked about it's a threat.
Yes, so we have this part of the brain called the reptilian complex. It has the brainstem is part of it, and the brainstem is about autonomic function. Then we have the amygdala, which is our fight and flight response. And there's also the cerebellum. And the cerebellum is like our CPU, our central processing unit. And that processes 80% of the connections in our brain. So it's our core being, if you like. And that reptilian complex is always looking at data and assessing whether it's safe, unsafe, or needs further checking. And so what it does is comparing information coming in to everything you've ever done in your life, all the time. So if there's a situation where perhaps you've previously lost some money and you recognise at that time that was a particularly emotionally charged event for you, then your brain's going to look back and say, what did we do last time we put some money on the line? And it's going to go, oh, that wasn't good. So it's going to turn on that fight or flight response, which then can create that fear. That fear then means that logic and reason go out of the window, and the rules that people are told, you've got to follow the rules. But I don't follow the rules. Sometimes it just goes.
It's funny actually talking about, you just touched on rules there, because with a lot of traders out there, they are told to follow rules, do back testing, follow your strategy, or whether you've automated your trading into a systematic approach, and that is your saviour. That is the holy grail. To an extent, it can be, because you're at least following a certain amount of rules. But what you're implying is that there's still something else going on, that people win the moment, and I feel this, and this is why when I'm working with people, I know that in the moment those rules can all be thrown out the window. And
exactly.
Right, okay.
Exactly, because that process of checking by this reptilian complex, this early part of our brain, that is being checked against previous data. And if that previous data is seen to be unsafe, and that's really, there's only three states: safe, unsafe, and uncertain. So if it's deemed to be unsafe, then the fight or flight response will be turned on. And then that's why the whole process then, and this is all taken care of way, way beneath our conscious awareness. So when we're told to follow the rules, that's great if you can do that. But if you're finding that you're not following the rules, there is a process that's going on in your psyche that is creating that problem.
A conflict.
A conflict, exactly that.
Right, okay. So consciously, you know what you should be doing, but then, and you can do it part of the time, but then at some parts of the time, at key points, maybe you've had, as a trader, a few losing trades, and then the emotions flare up, so to speak, and then, like I've said, then someone's more likely to then maybe deviate away from the rules. But it can happen if they've had a run of winners as well. And
absolutely.
So,
yes.
And that's where that conflict comes from, what they're doing consciously to what you've said, a subconscious level.
Yes, and in fact, there won't actually be a conflict, because that process will just happen.
Yeah.
So even though you consciously want to do it, that early part of your brain is running the show at that point. And so, talking of conflict, a fundamental part of my job is to, when I see clients, is to assess how they function, their personality, and the things that drive them. And personality is crucial. I mean, let's just take your personality, if you don't mind, Charlie. Do you mind me talking about your personality?
I don't know if I'm that sure about this. Well, yeah, go on then. Yeah.
Okay, so clearly you are an extrovert.
Am I? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not very good at assessing myself, so
Okay,
you tell
well,
me. Yeah.
Extrovert, and you have charisma, And
again, doubtful, but okay, carry on, yeah.
But there's a real air of confidence to you.
Okay.
Okay? So there's that side. Then we have the determined and focused side of you, which is, I can see why you're such a successful trader, because you have that determination and focus. And that shows in the way and how successful you are as a trader. But you also aren't afraid of conflict. And there is also a sensitive side to you as well, as you well know.
Mm-hmm.
But what I find really interesting is that you are able to switch from one to the other without even thinking about it. It's very natural for you. Now, not everybody's like that. Some people, let's take an example here of someone that feels they should be able to say exactly how it is, speak their mind. But at the same time, they have a real need to try and protect other people's feelings. So can you see where conflict then could come into that? They want to say how it is, but at the same time, they want to protect other people's feelings. Mm. And this is where emotional and psychological difficulties can occur. So we have to take into account personality, things that drive the person, so that therapy can be a tailor-made fit for each unique client.
Got you. Right. Wow. We're getting deep now because, like you said, I mean, assessing me like that, and I know that you can assess someone almost upon just spending a few minutes. You can assess someone, can't you, by their language, their body language, the language as well. So I understand, and I certainly appreciate that. But so it's a case of trying to work. If you were working with me, like you said, I have these different attributes and how I can jump from one to another in any different situation. But for some people, they can't necessarily jump that easily. If someone's coming back to trading and they're a fear-based trader and they're so swamped in fear, they can't just jump out of that after a string of a few losses or whatever. Yeah. So it's a case of what you're going to bring to what that trader is to try and help them come out of that, I guess. You would know, but yeah.
Yes, exactly that. Exactly right, yes.
Okay, so I know that I've got my little notebook here today because I was so keen to make sure that I got the key questions in, asking you whilst you're here, these certain questions. But, I mean, I've spent a lot of time with traders, giving them the strategies and methods that I give them from a mindset perspective to try and arrest some of those mistakes that they do within the context of their trades. But what I was going to say, what do you do to add to that? But I think I've almost asked this question a bit too late because you've almost just said that in that I'm working with people and I can say, look, these are the things that you need to do beyond strategies. These are what I would call psychological strategies or mindset-based strategies. So I'll give them practical plans for how they can arrest things like jumping out of trades and being too fearful and stuff like that. But that could still be, like you said, what you can do is complement that by then making sure that they're not so swamped in fear or so swamped in greed.
Yes, changing their response patterns to that fear, to that particular situation before conscious awareness. And that's really what it is.
Right.
And also, to add to that, something that traders can do, which is really important, that they can just do off their own back, is to ensure that when they're trading, that their brain actually recognises that they are trading. So, for example, if you have the luxury of having a dedicated trading room, wonderful. Because the brain is always anchoring things. When we fold our arms, we always tend to fold our arms in the same way because it's comfortable. So when we sit in the same chair, we're anchoring. When we sit down, what do we normally do when we're in this chair? Are we trading? Are we answering emails? Are we doing something else? So what we need to do is make sure that the brain understands, I'm now in trading mode. How do we tell it that? So it could be something, if you don't have a separate room, it could be a different chair, a different set of clothes, maybe just a cap, which is your trading cap. So When you're trading, the cap goes on. When you stop, the cap comes off. And you train your brain, actually, I'm in trading mode now. And that's really important. So the brain doesn't get confused and think, oh, I might be doing this or this or this. It's focused. It's subconscious, but the cap is on, and subconsciously you're telling your brain, okay, this is now what we're doing.
This was funny, actually, because I remember back when I used to do karate and I was training at the national squad, and I remember the first time I ever went down to the national squad, and I was young, maybe late teens, early 20s, and you pack your gi with you and your karate outfit, and I was used to, when I put my karate outfit on, that's it, I'm now ready to do karate. And I remember the first time I turned up, and they're like, oh no, just training your t-shirt and a pair of jogging bottoms sort of thing. And that, to me, I remember, it was odd to me, because I was used to years and years of putting my gi on. So I guess that's the same sort of anchor, the fact that I would do it. But like,
great example.
Rafa Nadal goes through a certain psychological process. He wears the same sort of socks and underwear and all that when he's playing a match. So these are the same sort of anchors that you see tennis players who are traditionally what they say, are superstitious and stuff. But they're just finding an anchor, aren't they?
Exactly that. Exactly. It gets the mindset focused. It gets the brain in tune with what's going on, as opposed to lots of different things. I sit here and I do this. Okay, your brain's going to go, well, we know we're going to do all these different things. But if you've got one specific thing that it can focus on, then that's
Brilliant.
Going to give you that focus.
Keith, I was going to ask you, what 3 pieces of advice could you give to any of our any traders watching this right now? And I think you've just given a brilliant piece of advice of having an anchor. I don't know if there was any other piece of advice that you would give. If we're running short of time now, but are there any other piece of advice you would give?
I think the important thing is to try to recognise what the issues are. What issues are they that you have, and then to seek some type of therapy or help to get rid of those unwanted behaviour patterns. If you recognise that, look, every time I do this, my stomach goes, or I can't push the button to go into that trade, or I'm in the trade and I'm like stressed all the time I'm in the trade, then that tells you that there's something wrong. So it's important to recognise and understand, actually, do I have a problem here? Do I have a problem? Well, yes, if you have, then you need to find a way of getting some help to deal with that.
Brilliant. Keith, we are way over time.
Are we?
Yeah, 22 minutes, I think. So thank you, Keith Tunstall, ever so much for coming down and doing this interview with me today. I found it absolutely fascinating. I'm sure you guys have too. This is Charlie Burton signing off. Trade safely out there.